Good morning. I'm kind of on a roll this morning with a little bit of possibly humor, and I really don't understand humor, uh, except uh, saying something, just a quip, a QUIP of some memory. And when you're my age, you have a lot of memories. Whoa, not all good, not all bad. Anyways, today it's called making maple syrup in an evaporator in a maple bush where the sap was collected on a stone boat pulled by a horse called Molly. Just one horse. My Uncle Stanley, he drove the horse and went to each of the maple trees and with a 5 gallon pail and dumped the sap that would come down the tree when the sun would heat the trees a little bit above freezing so that the sap would run like crazy. And we had a small evaporator shack with a decent size, not small, but a decent sized evaporator where we would boil the sap that my uncle collected from the trees with Molly's help. And you would have a fire going and you would have oh, this one was about a 6 foot long, I don't think it was longer than that, and it had separate trays that were somewhat hooked together, and as you drained the maple syrup off at the end, you would then open each of the valves and drain the sap that had become thickened with heat. The heat. That's the point of this whole thing. Anyways, back then we did not, I was 10, 12, no, perhaps less than that. Oh. Anyways, um, we would uh, use rubber tires to heat the sap. Well, no one knew about pollution, air pollution. I mean, landfills, they were called nuisance grounds. That a landfill is a dump, a garbage dump. And anyways, my dad got the evaporator running real good, and we were sitting in there drinking tea. And how we would do that when the sap was really boiling, we had a couple of cups there, and you would scoop out a, a a cup full of hot boiling sap from the maple trees, and and you would put a tea bag in it at that era. I'm talking 60 plus years ago. We had tea bags, and there were people who who had their tea. They didn't use tea bags, and if you didn't pay attention, you might try to drain the last dregs out of the teacup. We use mugs. Um, Without realizing that you were going to have tea in your teeth and so on. Anyway, so here's the deal. It took a 45-gallon drum of maple sap boiled down to 1 gallon of maple syrup. That's how much it took. A 45-gallon barrel of sap made 1 gallon of syrup. My dad said, "Listen, I have to run into town." He said, every 15 minutes, take a quarter or a half or a third something of a rubber tire and put it in the firebox. And he would start the fire with wood, of course, but once it was really going, then we fed rubber tires in, and people from 5, 6 miles away, they knew my dad, Harry, was making maple syrup because they thought the whole bush was burning down and it was just the smoke from the rubber tires. So, anyways, shooting at a little bit of humor today. Um, my dad, he left the bush. Of course, I was quite competent, capable. He said, every 15 minutes, put a part of the tire in there so that it doesn't go out. Well, I didn't have a clue what 15 minutes was, but I could tell when the sap was really boiling. And the problem came in when the whole evaporator, every little boil thing where the, however stuff boils, but when that bubble from the bottom of the tray would hit the air, there was a puff of black smoke from the burning sap. Anyways, it was the last time my dad ever asked me to run the evaporator while he went into town. And I burnt the whole blessed thing. I mean, all I was interested in doing was drinking hot tea and made with sap from the maple trees, no water, and or stepping over and opening the door to the little shed, which was really warm because boy, I was feeding a lot of rubber tires in there, and if the wind were not contrary, you could see outside the shack. I mean, if the wind were not, it might take you a few minutes standing there watching for the smoke to clear, the fog, black pall of rubber smoke coming off the rubber tires. And in order to see if there weren't a starling, which is called a blackbird, that had landed in a tree somewhere in the maple bush, and we were morally obligated to shoot them. And I don't know why. You never shot a robin, a red-winged blackbird. You didn't shoot them. They were pretty quick, actually. And but anyways, 8, 9, 10. I had my own 22, and and so that's what I did. But I fed that fire evaporator with rubber tires. And as I said, I didn't know much about time. I've since learned. Still really can't tell 15 minutes from 20 or 15 minutes from 10. Anyways, as I said, it was the last time my dad ever let me run the evaporator by myself. I kind of appreciated that because he kind of hung out there because he cleaned the evaporator. That meant he let the fire go out. He took each tray and scrubbed it with SOS pads. We had SOS pads back then. Steel wool, may have been just steel wool. Anyways, he was not happy. He expressed that he wasn't happy. But anyways, he didn't pick on me at all. But he never asked me to run the evaporator by myself again. So not all was lost. There was benefit from it. Anyways, making maple syrup. And my aunt, dear Aunt Sadie, She would filter the maple syrup when it was finished, and she put it in my uncle's wine bottles. My uncle was a dedicated Irishman from the north end of Ireland, and he had been through the Second World War. And from the day he got out of the war, and probably every day that he was in it, he was never sober. So we had a lot of wine bottles that were empty that were filled with maple syrup. So listen, just to review, it takes a 45-gallon barrel of sap boiled down to evaporated down, ergo, they called it an evaporator, uh, to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. You go and buy a facsimile of maple syrup. That's only sugar and water that's boiled down in color. Um, Real maple syrup is made naturally by heating the sap and evaporating it and having real maple syrup, which I use in almost everything except my coffee. So, a lesson in science, mathematics. 15 minutes is not 10. Ergo, you can burn the sap, really burn it. Oh my goodness. My dad never complained that I remember, because he shouldn't have gone into town and left a kid polluting the neighbor's air and everybody else's air for miles around. Anyways, that's the way she went. Not a spiritual connotation to this at all. Just some background, perhaps a little humor, perhaps not. I hope you find this enjoyable. You, unless you came from Quebec, East Coast, Ontario, you wouldn't know how they made maple syrup. And you go into a grocery store. I, of course, have my favorite, which is down in Edmonton. And you look at your choices for maple syrup. Trust me, children, buy the real stuff. It's not as dark as I used to make it. Oh, but because it's not burned, but them's the breaks. Okay, we did not know anything about pollution. We did not know that burning rubber tires uh, would affect the ozone. Probably still does. Climate warming, not likely. Rubber tires, oh, we could have helped. Yes. Okay, God bless. Say, I hope you have a good day. I hope you remember my Creator, yours if you choose, His Son, my Savior, yours if you choose. Don't go making maple syrup by burning rubber tires. They don't like that nowadays. No. God bless. Say.